My name's Matt Williams. I'm the curator here at the RCA, and we're very pleased to have Zineb Sedira here in conversation with Coline Milliard. Zineb has recently participated in Venice Biennale, as well as focused on Triennale, and also solo shows that played in Tokyo, amongst others. And Coline here is the UK editor for Modern Painters and the managing director for Ibraz, which focuses on
visual culture in the Middle East and North Africa.
So
quite new.
And it's an online.
It's an online platform, yeah, and we've become a publishing house.
And we also next week will be Zineb will be involved in MATAF Interference, which is in partnership with Shabak, which is focusing on basic Middle Eastern kind of culture. So yeah, thank you very much for coming. And next week is Haroon Mirza with Sue Hubbard. And thank you.
Great, thank you. For this first, basically to give you an idea of what this talk is going to be about, we're going to talk about two of the most recent pieces by Zineb. This one, Garden d'Image, which was shown in Paris last December, quite recently, at the Palais Tokyo, and another one which just been unveiled at Fox and Triennial. Two different pieces, quite different subjects, but kind of also related to Zineb's relationship to the country of Paris, Algeria, and country where she's also partly living between London and Algiers. So maybe we can just flip through a few of these images you see here. So it's a video installation, got a double screen here and one at the back, and it's basically based on this lady, Safia Kwasi, who is a widow of a photographer called Mohamed Kwasi, who was one of the only photographer to document the independence war in Algeria from a Nigerian perspective. There are loads of images of the events in this war, but they're usually taken either by French journalists or by the militaries. So it was, very interesting kind of starting point for us to shift perspective on this. And so this piece, for those of you who haven't seen it, is kind of unravels as a portrait and an homage to Safia. So maybe you can start to tell us a little bit by where did you meet this extraordinary lady and how did you come across her work, and maybe did you know Mohamed Kwasi's photograph before starting work on this project?
Yeah, I came across some of his photographs because a friend of mine, an artist based in Algiers, happened to be a friend of the family, and she had a few photographs, or copies of photographs, I should say, of Mohamed Kwasi, and I was kind of, as soon as I saw them, I knew they were very different from all the other photographs I had seen for the Algerian war. And I was wondering why were they so different, and then she explained that he was an Algerian photographer. So unlike all the photographs that Coline said, who have come from the French side, he was actually on the Algerian side, therefore he was able to go to places that no French, unless they were freedom fighters, fighting for the Algerian cause, were not able to go. So they were very, very different. He was able to get very close to the fighters, very close to the refugees, very close to the orphans, very close to also what was interesting about him, he was, and you probably don't know that, but although Algeria got liberated in 62, in 54, between 54 and 62, there was a provisional Algerian government, which was based in Tunisia, in Tunis. And because Tunisia was very supportive of Algeria and was recognizing Algeria, it wasn't the only country who recognized Algeria at the time as a state. There was many other, obviously throughout the Arab world, a lot of communist countries also recognized it, and Morocco, obviously the border countries. But anyway, the provisional government was based in Tunisia. Therefore, he was working from Tunisia, but every now and then he had to go through Algeria to kind of meet, the freedom fighters and the politicians. But I mean, his work is interesting because of that, but also because after 62, he took a lot of photographs also of the post-liberation, and throughout the 60s, 60s and early 70s, Algeria became, for people who don't know, and especially Algiers, became a place where a lot of revolutionary group had offices there, you know. So, you know, that's why he happened to have photographed and met people like Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, Lula, and all those kind of extraordinary people that we hear now, you know, in terms of a revolution. He was able to meet them and to photograph with them. And Frantz Fanon, obviously, was a very close friend of them. He also took photographs of Frantz Fanon. Also his funeral, because as probably aware, he's been buried in Algeria because he took the Algerian nationality. So really, really strong body of photographic work, but very varied, from taking photographs of orphan, from literally taking photographs of people, you know, these girls, you know. But what also interested me with this piece is to look at how art and culture is used during wartime as a kind of resistance or revolutionary tool, and how he used his camera, because he always said I wasn't a man of guns, you know, I'm an artist, I'm an intellectual. So for him, using his camera was his way to contribute to this war in many ways, and that's something that kind of really interested me in relation to perhaps other pieces of work I've done previously and after.
And Safia as well was also very involved in the war, because so that their history, their story, as it were, is that they left Algiers to study in Paris, or to work. He was working in the factory and taking like photography courses at night, and she was just training to like technical courses or something. But then they went to Tunisia, and she was the secretary of the Ministry of Information, so she ended up having a really high position as well. And they were two freedom fighters, as it were, but involved in a war which wasn't directly, you know, physical, I suppose. But so you were also quite inspired by her as a freedom fighter and as a resistance.
Yeah, yeah, and also as a call it image keeper, memory keeper, because obviously her husband died in '96. She's left with now this amazing archive of images, negatives and prints, and she's struggling because she's an old lady and she's struggling with what to do with this archive and to lead. She hasn't got any children. Who's going to take care of it? And she, at one point in the video, she says, I'm really upset with my husband because he didn't tell me what to do with that when we died. And although he died slowly from illness, so, you know, he could have prepared her, but she feels she's not prepared. And now she's left with trying to keep giving visibility to the work, as well as trying to preserve the negatives, while like most of them more than 50 years old, you know. So I was very interested in that, and obviously as a woman, as an artist who has children, this kind of legacy, how do you kind of pass on this kind of either knowledge or this creativity to your children once you're gone, you know, who's going to take care of it and how. So there were questions that kind of interested me, but also because a lot of my work before this piece was about oral history and how you pass on from one generation to another, either tradition, stories, etc. So that kind of fitted quite well with this piece. In some ways, this piece actually encompassed so many ideas I had explored.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, maybe we should come back to this in a minute, but I think that what's very particular about this piece in a way is that as much as it's done as an artwork with some right, you know, it's about her, and it's about Mohammed, and it's about his history and his heritage, it was also a way for you to really try to, you know, commit yourself to help her, didn't you? Because I think you worked with this other Algerian artist, Zineb Sedira, but with the idea of, you know, through this piece, trying to gain visibility for the archive and maybe actually change the history of this archive. And, you know, hopefully, and it hasn't happened yet, but it's, you know, I know that you're still working on it, trying to, you know, to say to institutions, to museums, you know, there is this incredibly rare collection of material that needs protection. So in a way, you're kind of very directly putting yourself out there, committed to help. And it's not just like a kind of remote presentation of someone. It's really kind of active in a way.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I mean that's how the idea came about to make a film, because when I met Safia and we straight away got on and we had a long conversation, and I mean, I saw him as the other Algerian artist based in Algiers, we were thinking which way can you help her, and obviously a lot of money because to scan and all those negatives an artist is to make a piece of work. And because I show internationally, hopefully somebody will be interested in the archive and perhaps come up with an idea, with a solution, some money, etc. So since then, since this piece has been shown in Manchester, I think Paris and Venice, quite a few people now are starting to contact me, so it's interesting, academics, curators, artists also. So yeah, and I go and talk sometimes just on the archive and on this project. So yeah, I'm hoping that something concrete, something quite strong will happen, whereby I could go back to her and say, listen, we find those people. How can we go now? How can we, make it work? So, but obviously, then I did that with a video piece. But now, obviously, that's only the beginning of the work. There is so much more things we need to do around the visibility of his work and her. So
yeah, but I mean, it's a great in a way because it's a finished project, but it's also very much a starting point. And do you think that other of your projects function like that a little bit, or is it something you do a bit more informally in Algiers? I mean, you've been inviting so many other people, myself included, to come and visit Algeria with you to meet other people, other writers, other artists. I mean, so I suppose my question here is, how would you define, your kind of commitment to the Algerian culture or scene at large, and how do you see it function?
well, for me, the problem, and that's probably will connect to the talk I'm doing next Saturday here, but the reason I'm trying to bring things back to Algeria is because basically the Algerians can't really get out of the country because of visa, big, major visa restriction for them to go out. And just to make it even things more complicated, is that it's probably the only Arab country who asks foreigners or Europeans to have a visa to enter. So you have these kind of things where they can't go out, but when Coline came, we had to apply for a visa for her. Okay, it was quite straightforward. But depending on the country you come from, for example, if you're German perhaps, or if you're British, because Coline's got a French passport, it's a bit more complicated. So it makes also people not being able to enter. They can't leave, people can't really enter, or they can really if they want to, but it's not easy like going to Morocco or Tunisia or Beirut or whatever. So I just thought, okay, if they can't, I can come in, I've got an Algerian passport, and it's quite easy to come in. So I come in, as you say, I try to invite as many people and help them with a visa application if required. And when possible, I've also, as you know, I've made or created some opportunities for some Algerian artists to come here and do some things. So I'm just trying to, with the little means I've got, to kind of still create a dialogue that wouldn't otherwise, that would happen, but perhaps much more slowly. I'm just lucky to have this passport and French and Algerian passport and be able to travel in the way I do. I'm also quite respected there in Algeria, so people trust me if I kind of, yeah. So for me, it's an ongoing project, and but the other thing also that very interests me throughout this body of work is to kind of, I'm really trying to kind of resist the amnesia around the Algerian people. Because I was born in France, and I don't know if you're very much aware, but France is very difficult and doesn't accept very easily its relationship to Algeria, its colonial relationship to Algeria. So when you're raised up in France like me, you're not told about the Algerian war, you're told like it's a little thing. Even in the history book now, actually at school, as you know, you went to school in France, there's very little spoken about the Algerian war. So for me, and also, as you know, I had last year a show in France where I showed a piece of work with my mom, where my mom talks about the Algerian war and the torture she saw and the rapes and things like that. And that was censored, yeah, by the French. She said, no, you can't say those things, it's not possible, So I had a big battle, they reopened the show, etc. So I'm really trying to kind of resist amnesia in terms of memory, of that type of memory. So, and that's furthermore interesting when I work with older people, when I work with my parents who are the same age, and it's also a generation of people who are living soon. And also they're simple people, although they might have very simple. In Algeria, when you invite people to speak about the Algerian war, it's always the big leaders, one of the presidents and whatever, the people like Safia, like my parents or Mohamed Bouazizi, they're not really, he was just a photographer, she was just a secretary. So for me, it's very important to kind of give voice to those people, especially when it comes to the history of Algeria and the Algerian war, if you want. But to be honest, it's also neglected in Algeria. It's not just France who's kind of trying to push it down. It's also Algeria who's not very good at kind of trying to celebrate, or it does celebrate, but when it wishes and depending on who and what it chooses what it wants to celebrate according to the development of the time. So
yeah, it's a really double-sided problems because unlike in the UK, it's really, I owe the UK to have become much more kind of post-colonially aware, I suppose. In fact, with Matt, we had this great teacher, Jean Fischer, who was kind of a scholar on that, field, and she was like, oh, you're from Marseille, so yeah, just check out this film, Montego, it's called Battle of Algiers. Never heard of it. I was like, okay, I went to see it, and I was like, whoa, it's like, how have I just missed this whole part of, what makes my country? I come from the south of France, this enormous Algerian community, never addressed. And part of the problem with that is that the Algerian War was not a war in France officially until 1999. So it finished in 1962, so there we go. So about 30 years what it was called les événements d'Algérie, with the events, it's like the troubles in Ireland, I suppose. It's exactly the same idea. So anyway, that's the French problem, I suppose. And in Algeria, the problem is that because you had this one political party who became top in the government, all the other parties who fought during the war have been completely erased from, public memory. So they are not in history books. They didn't play any role in the independence. So, how you present history is very much how you want to present yourself. And I suppose that's very much what's kind of coming through your work and the pieces you do, and particularly this one, where actually we focus on something else. Someone who may have not been so visible during the events where they were, but then still had very much something to say. Maybe just to make a link between this piece and the piece that you just presented there, which is on now, to a Foxton trailer. Maybe we can just kind of flick through some of those. That's actually cool. And so that's the latest piece that Zineb did, and it's opened last week. It's been shot on 2 lighthouses, one in Kabylie, in Kabylie, which is a region in Algeria, and one near Algiers. And obviously the subject matter here is very different. It's about these places. You've got an interview with the lighthouse keeper. But again, the idea of the transmission of the place and memory is very important for several reasons. One of them is that the lighthouses in Algeria have all been built by the French. The first one a little bit after the invasion. So the invasion was the 1830s, so I think in the 1850s or something like that. And the last build was just a few years before the independence. So you have this kind of interesting parallel history between this kind of architectural buildings and the kind of history of colonial history of the country. And I suppose in a way, these are guardians of some sort of memory. They also keep up a different kind of tradition in Europe now. Everything is completely automatic. In Algeria, you have people there just kind of coming up every night, just checking that everything is working. So it's again about the people, about something which is not very visible, but about the voice of the people that we tend to neglect, perhaps. Somehow.
And it's also about a trade that might be, who knows, in 20 years' time, the lighthouse in Algeria will be automatic also. You won't have those jobs anymore, the lighthouse keeper jobs. So I was very interested in kind of talking to some retired lighthouse keepers, and the one that is in the movie was much younger and understand, not only understand the job they're doing there, but also what their aspiration, what their interest is, in terms of working in such places. And as you can imagine, very magical when I was there, that's Primo, one of the lighthouse people. And what was interesting when I was there also is I had a room full, an archive full of logbooks, and two types of logbooks. One is the lighthouse people logbook where they're writing what they do every day. And the logbooks were as old as the age of the lighthouse, and the older one was the one we just saw, was 1856, I think, or 58, I can't remember now. So there was all the logbooks from that time to now. And the second lighthouse is, say, 1906 logbooks. And then the visitors' books, the other book where visitors would come and visit and make a comment and sign their name and whatever. So I kind of started looking at them, and I was very much amazed by a few things. First of all, the changes of handwriting from all the time to now, you know. Also the transition between, those books were telling so much about the colonial history of those lighthouses in some ways. Because you had before that, all the lighthouse keepers were French men. The visitors were many French people. And then after, just before 62 and after 62, all the names of the lighthouse keepers are Arab names. And all the people who are visiting the lighthouses now, it's like they reclaim, you know, Algerians, so they reclaim their space, the space of the, so I did a lot of work around the logbook also. So it's a complicated installation because it's a 6 screen. You've got the 4-1 that we saw earlier placed onto the back projection in a very long space, like a kind of corridor space. And then you've got a single screen, which is a projection of the interview. And then you've got on the plasma screen, more or less that size, you've got this piece, which is in 3 sections. One section is me going up the stairs of the lighthouse, counting. And as I go up the stairs, I'm counting the steps. And as I go up the stairs, I'm kind of struggling because I can't, breathe anymore. I'm just like really struggling. And you hear it very strongly. And then in this section, it says what it says, name through time in the logbook. So I'm kind of studying the names that appears page by page from a certain period to another one. And then this section, which is looking at handwriting, but also about a lot of the names of the cities, because people who put the cities where they came from, where the French name of the city is not the Algerian name. Since then, they've been given different names. So I make some kind of comments about that.
So you see, like, Bougie, because obviously in French colonies, all the names, we were very good at erasing the local culture. That's what we did. So when you arrive, all the names were completely, became French, like Bougie or Philippeville or something completely unthinkable. I don't think the English did that. They were kind of a bit more gentle in their approach. The French really kind of. And then immediately after 62, all the old Arab names come back, and that's really quite moving also to see them kind of the space being reclaimed because the reality has changed. Because you see the independent type. Maybe on the
and then just to finish, so there's a section that called Museum of Traces. In one of the lighthouses, there was a little museum, very cute, at the bottom of the lighthouse, the tower. And in there was a lot of objects from the lighthouse, dating from the opening of the lighthouse till now. So I would say this section is more to do with archiving and this kind of tracing memory and recording, memory, and this is a memory. This object that we don't use anymore because they were older ones. Since then, although in Algeria still, traditionally, is still more advanced than it was 40 years ago, so they kind of made a bit of, and everything is written in French, which I also find interesting, instead of it writing in Arabic. Then there is always a paradox where, like the image before, you have all the plates of the lighthouse keepers, but they were the French lighthouse keepers, that they kept, and the text are written in French, and I just thought there is a kind of paradox where, on one hand, they're trying to erase or get rid of the French colonial, but on the other hand, they also exhibit it and are very proud of it in some ways, So there is always, you've come to Algeria, there is always that in-between thing where I think it's confusing, and actually it's very confusing for understand why should we actually save something like that. You know, it's not the history of Algeria, but it is the history of Algeria, even though the French were, you know, most of the time the bearer of that kind of.
I wonder if it could be compared with nostalgia, the feeling of nostalgia for the communist era in Russia, for example, which is, you know, it's been rejected dramatically, and then nonetheless, you know, you have this kind of longing for that time. And in Algeria, maybe there's also this kind of complicated feeling where, you know, the French are, you know, been absolutely beyond dreadful and, you know, kicked out of the country ultimately. But there's still this idea that something French is a bit more prestigious, or I don't know. It's complicated, isn't it? And it's not as clear cut as you think it would be. And I think this image of this little museum kind of really captured that in a way, which is. But that's changing, though. I mean, when we went, the young people don't speak French anymore, so it's kind of slowly, but still very, very present even today.
I think there is still interesting, you know, like, for example, croissant that you eat in the morning. In Algeria, it's become almost like an Algerian croissant, and for the young generation that doesn't know, they probably think it's an Algerian pastry, but we all know it's a French pastry. That's only an example, you know, but there are so many like that, and it's quite interesting, you know, for me to see. And for me, perhaps because I come from both cultures, Algeria seems almost to encompass the perfect situation, because it has these two things: the Arabic, Algerian, Muslim identity, and then on the other hand, the French, you know, identity. So yeah, that's quite.
Yeah, I've got a quite funny little anecdote, but I don't know if you find it funny, but I do. I was in Algiers, I was in a ham, so I was, you know, completely being washed by this woman who was sitting on my back and scrubbing me, and and shouting at me and turning, give me your leg, give me your arm, and this and that. And then she said, "Oh, so where do you live?" And I said, "Give her Zineb's address in Algiers." So she's like, "Yeah." And then she looks at me and said, "Well, you're Algerian, right?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I'm French." And then she started calling me madam and vouvoying me, to use the kind of super polite, super formal thing. I mean, I was naked, she was sitting on my back. You know what I mean? It was just like, but this moment where it kind of completely broke the, you know, it was really weird, and that's a very, very striking memory, and I think it really kind of captures, especially for the old people, you know what, because she was like, you know, 70 or something like that.
I think there is a generation who want that.
But maybe just to go back to this piece, there's two things that I'd like to discuss. Maybe the first fragment is this one.
Yeah.
Because in a way there's something that kind of ran through your work, and I don't know, you know, how well you're familiar with Zineb's work, but the idea of the fragmentation, you see that you always have to take it all at once. You know, you've got four things here happening differently, plus in the corner of your eye you've got these other screens as well, and that comes from, you know, quite old pieces. I remember this La Maison de la Mer, which is basically a kind of a grid of photographs, which are all details from your mom's house in Algeria. Again, fragmented. We never really see her completely, but we see, you know, the lace on her cuff. We see a tea towel. We see just a bit of a head and scarf. So what interests you in this idea of the fragmentation, and what do you think it brings to the piece kind of perception in general, and maybe in this piece?
I don't know, I think there is two things really. I think I like this idea of multi-screens of fragmentation, because I like this idea that there is not just one story, there are many little stories, perhaps one story with sub-stories. So I don't like fixing myself really with one, although I have done some single screens sometimes. But for me, they become quite frustrating. I think I'd like to talk about other layers, you know, within something that appears one story, but in fact that has many stories. And I think that's one way. And also because as a filmmaker, I find it much more exciting, I guess, to play more sculpturally with more different formats, and it's much more exciting for me. I think I've moved on from the kind of the single screen, the black space, you know, and I'm really now to try to play with with the experience that the people, the audience will have in the space. So therefore, the way they walk, to where the sound is placed, where the screens are placed, all that is very part of the whole experience, which also becomes a problem because when this piece, for example, is site-specific in many ways in a huge space, now if I have to show this piece somewhere else, that's going to be very difficult because I will never have the same space. I might have bigger, smaller, or not as long, or square, or anyway. So it's kind of because space becomes so important now in my video practice. As before, I was like, it was a bit more like being in a cinema.
Well, I suppose they're really kind of a crossover between an installation and video pieces. And that was very in your piece that you did before in Mauritania. You had like 14 screens, didn't you? And like hanging speakers, kind of going. If you had a wall screen like this, you had also screens on the side, and the whole, the whole ceiling above was kind of full of these speakers. So in a way, you were kind of really trying to break this kind of viewer projection kind of thing.
Yeah, and playing with film more, more sculptural, more object-led. I mean, film is film, but with floating curtain particularly, I think it worked because they were all plasma screen coming out of the wall, and I was using all the cables they were showing. Usually we hide the cables, we don't want the cables to be shown. But here they were all hanging everywhere, pulling from everywhere. Of course, it worked with a piece of work, the cables. But I just wanted something more physical, more three-dimensional, something less flat, less 2D.
Yeah, absolutely.
And again, surrounded so that the person watching had to go from one place to the other, therefore had to move from one screen to the other.
Which is what's happening here as well, because if you have this with a specific soundtrack at the end of this big space, then you need to wear headphones to switch on and get another soundtrack, which would be previous interview, and then switch again and get the other soundtrack. So you have three coexisting soundtracks kind of matching different videos. So the time of your viewing is really kind of directed by sound in a way, but it's also directed by how you move around the space and what attracts you in a way you can, decide to stay in a way. Can we go to the staircase one? Or maybe this one? Oh yeah. Okay, so two last questions because we have time for questions. One is about this one, because obviously this is Primo, he's a lighthouse keeper. It's kind of an amazing story. I just can't believe how it happened. He says that he was basically a tramp living outside the lighthouse, and he was thinking, oh, I wish I was a lighthouse keeper, that would be so cool. And then he is. And he doesn't really explain how that happened, you would expect that. But he's,
well, he says that he knew the lighthouse keeper.
Yeah, he sees that he was coming by, and then he go back.
I mean, have coffee with them and things like that. And when the place came back, they actually offered him the place, and that was his dream come true. And he talks about his life in the lighthouse as a paradise, using the word paradise. And he wishes he could live there because they go in shift and they live for 5-6 days, and then they go and then they do, So they're not there, and he wishes he could be there all the time because, he loves being there. And when he's not doing the lights, lighting or switching off the light, he goes and does some fishing. And if he doesn't do fishing, he's a painter and paints when he has some spare time. So for him, it's a perfect life in some way. So,
yeah, absolutely. We touched on it a little bit, but how would you describe the role of portraiture in your work? Because this is very much a portrait of this man as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you see yourself as a portrait maker somehow?
Yeah, I think because in a lot of my work I do with Safia again, and when I use my parents, I have a tendency to like elderly people and work with them. But I did do a lot of interviews with retired older. But the difficulty that comes when you portray, when you do portrait of people of a certain age is that it's not, depending on the person in front of you, it's not always easy. It's not always easy because they're not sometimes as talkative, or they don't speak as clearly as I wish they could, or things like that. So you with my interest in working with them, sometimes I come across also the difficulty where, for example, I did 2 interviews with 2 retired lighthouse, amazing guys, you know, and I read them in the main part, but you don't hear them speaking. But you know, they just, you know, they couldn't engage with what I was asking them. Also, all of them, most of all the lighthouse people, come from the big Berber region, which is who speaks a different language than Arabic. You know, there's the indigenous people from Algeria, therefore their language is Berber. And you know, the guy kept telling him, speak to me in Arabic. You know, I don't understand Berber, and although he knows how to speak, you know, everyone knows how to speak Arabic in Algeria. He kept going back to Berber and talking to me in that language, and you know, the other guy had an hour or 2 of interview that I couldn't understand. So you know, so I decided to include for Primo because what he was saying was so sweet and what he was saying was so interesting, and he really explained very well the day-to-day life, you know, of his activity, you know, there, and that for me was interesting. Although with the older men, what would have been interesting is to have perhaps spoken about that transition, because a lot of them started work in '62 during the independence, you know. So they couldn't recall, they didn't remember, they didn't know, or perhaps they don't want to talk about it, I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, that's part of the process, isn't it?
And it is, yeah.
And perhaps the question I was interested in to finish is, here we see you walking up this kind of very long spiral staircase. And just struck me, just preparing for the talk, that in your earlier work from 2003 to 2004, you know, you were very much on screen, you were yourself talking to your parents, with your children, and then you kind of disappeared. Then you wanted to kind of open up to other things which were going beyond your family, with pieces like Safi or Midossi, which were looking perhaps at Algeria and more, and even beyond Algeria, but the idea of migration and you know, diaspora and all these ideas in a much more kind of general way. So you disappeared from your work, and now you're back. And I was wondering, you know, how do you expect this to come back? How important is kind of almost performative side of your work, you know, to present yourself, performing that very specific walk up the lighthouse?
When I saw this staircase, I did feel it would be interesting to have somebody going up or down the staircase. I did think of working with an actress and actor, as I've done previously, but somehow I couldn't think of the actor or the actress that would work in the space. And I'm like that, I don't force things. If it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. So I ended up in Algeria there, with all the crews here, and I'm just like, the staircase is still there, it's beautiful. And I just thought, well, you know, I'm going to do it, and we'll see what comes up from it. So I did it. And when I saw the footage after, by the way, it's shot on film, 16mm film, really amazing quality and lighting. When I saw the footage, I just thought, although I did an accent myself, because I don't like really, like a lot of people, I don't like accent myself. So I just thought I'd go to edit, because I just felt it added something to the piece of work. And also it said something about me and perhaps my introspection in terms of my identity, my art, etc. And that kind of counting in French, step by step, and you see me struggling as I get closer, you know, something quite, yeah, you know, about how I kind of ascend to that kind of, to my idea of how can I explain that? How do I get to what I want in terms of this kind of amnesia of memory? You know, how do I, you know, I've kind of set myself almost a task to unravel a lot of stuff to do with Algeria and memory, but not just, I mean, let's be clear, not all my work is set in Algeria. I've done also something in the UK and has nothing to do with Algeria, but we're talking about 2 pieces where actually they were shot in Algeria. So I'm kind of set myself with those pieces to kind of try to unravel a lot of issue on the memory of Algeria and perhaps in connection with France, you know, also. And how do I do that? And with a struggle with that. So perhaps for me it was also about that struggle, about that kind of, perhaps not struggle, but that difficulty that but I still get there. I struggle, but I still get there, you know, somehow, perhaps in a slower manner or with a slower pace, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of almost acts as a metaphor in a way for
Yeah.
your own kind of working method and research.
Yeah.
And reaffirms your, I suppose, your own perspective as well, your own position. This is how I, as Zineb, see those people, see those lighthouses. I mean, something I noticed when I wrote this text for you recently was that one is in Algiers where you have a flat and you go very, very regularly, and one is not that far from where your parents are from. So in a way, you're kind of covering two different Algerias, two different places.
One in the city and one in the country.
Yeah.
So, but just, I mean, not all my work is about Algeria, and I've shot some in the UK, and I've shot some in Mauritania, and I'm doing something in Marseille now, so, just those two pieces of work picked up afterwards. So I think that perhaps we should leave some time for questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Unless there are any questions for please, ma'am, please go ahead.
It's an exhibition at the National Gallery of photographs of the Algerian War, and it was two full set of photographs, one of all the photographs by Paris Match and one set of photographs by Pierre Bourdieu. And basically what was interesting that the photographs were formally the same, but just the content of the text was so different. Like Paris Match would say, we are protecting the poor Algerian, and Pierre Bourdieu would say, this is a ghetto, basically.
Yeah.
And I was wondering, it's true that all the photographs we see of Algeria look a little bit the same, and you said that there was this Algerian photographer, the photograph by the content are different because he could access a place where the French could not go. But I was wondering how formally also the photographs were different, whether they are more personal, or how, if there is, as a photographer...
I mean, there is two things about him. He was working officially for the Ministry of Information, but he was also a photographer, an artist, So this is a photograph that Safia has. It's a personal photographs, because the official ones belongs to the Ministry of Information. He couldn't keep them. So the one actually I know, I love the official one because also, you see, you can also wonder whether there is also an official table, about this photograph. But no, I saw all the personal one, and they're quite interesting. But let's not forget that there were a lot of French photographers and filmmakers who were on the cause of the Algerian, like René Gauthier, for example, who actually did some amazing work, especially René Gauthier, with the films he's done on the Algerian war. And again, because he was working for the Algerian, he managed to go places that the other wouldn't. But they're the ones, they're the images that we don't know very well, as you know. And I'm sure that the same thing we ask the French photographer to take a photo of, and then Mohamed Bassi to take the same photo. I'm sure the sensibility about it will be quite different, and that's quite interesting, I think. So I don't know if I responded to your question.
I was also wondering if formally, like, they were more into details, or whether they were more personal about relationship between Algerians, or...
I think you can see that he's very at ease with people, because he speaks the same language. Sometimes he's also in the photographs himself, which is quite interesting. Smiling and joking, having tea. You can see he's taking photograph of the children at school in Nomaki, or in a situation that you only think somebody like him could, or women at home. He was all the time with women, and they were all freedom fighters fighting, Some of the photographs actually, when I saw them, I had tears in my eyes because I don't know, they were very, I don't know. For me, and I showed some of them to my parents, and my parents were really touched by it because they were like, but we never went there, and he went there, for me, they can. But it'd be interesting to do some real comparisons between perhaps some of the French photographs and his.
There's this thing also which is kind of going through quite well in your piece of the interest you had for the role of women during the war. And you see them, kind of dressed in full military, like big guns. It's incredible, and it's interesting. This Safia during the video makes just a little wry comment saying, at the time women were the equal of men. And she just says it kind of in passing, but I thought, it was quite interesting how that moment was a real moment of liberation for, all sorts of things, women, that has been then,
Yeah, and the other really powerful, she says that always, when I think about it, she says at one point, we have created more intellectual artists in 7 years of the war than in 130 years of colonization. Meaning the war actually have created all those kind of intellectual and artists and sport, so sport was very strong. But in the 130 years of French colonization, there was no, because people were not really entitled to go to school at the time, indigenous people were not entitled to go to school, and things like that. So she's saying, through the 7 years, we managed to do far more than in 130 years, and I just go, wow, isn't it such a powerful thing to say, Anyway, any other questions?
I was just wondering whether the recent uprisings and revolutions in the Middle East had influenced these recent works about Algeria, or whether if you already finished them, whether you looked at
No, actually, yeah, it's a good question, because the first trip that I planned to go to Algeria to shoot had to be cancelled because there was the riots in Tunisia had started and it was affecting Algeria, obviously. There was a lot of marches and things like that. So we had to cancel the first trip. So when we went a month later, thinking things would calm down, then Egypt started. But we still went. But what happened then, because the crew was mainly British, we had to have the military escort with us everywhere, as before we would have not had that. So yeah, we were in some ways, we had to compromise because we had non-stop those guys with us. And when I say military escort, I'm talking about heavy duty stuff, Not for me because I'm Algerian, so they didn't care, but it's more for the crew. So that kind of was problematic at times because we couldn't move as fast as we would have normally. We couldn't go to places that we would have gone normally, and it did affect a bit. But in terms of once we were in the lighthouse, the guys, the lighthouse keepers, they were not, so lovely, and we were eating and spending all our time there. And we didn't really. It's really like being in a bubble. You don't see the outside world at all, And then as soon as we got to Algiers for the second lighthouse and the escort left, they felt we were safe in Algiers, so that was a bit easier for us. But yeah, there was a lot of march and happening in a few big cities around when we were shooting. But
you have to calm down a little bit now, isn't it?
Yeah.
In Algeria. It felt like it almost kind of
You
a little bit off control. But now.
Any more questions?
As a woman in Algeria and a creative artist, do you feel threatened at all? Or both those things, one as a woman, one as an artist?
No, not at all. Threatening which way? In which way?
In as much as you are expressing things which possibly could be controversial, and you are a woman expressing those things, which is possibly not unaccepted.
Oh no, there are women who are far more expressive than in Algeria, Yeah. I mean, Algeria is an interesting country. People obviously, in England, people know very little about it, but it's a country, although it's got a dictator in place and like many other Arab countries, it's actually one of the few countries who has a freedom of expression, whereby in the press and in literature or whatever, you can actually criticize the government and you are left free. So I think probably there's two countries, three countries in the Arab world who has this kind of thing in place, and Algeria is one of them. So, people are quite critical in Algeria. This is not a problem, women or men. No, it's not.
Has that been for...
And woman artists, if she had a problem, it's more because she's an artist, not because she's a woman. Her struggle would be striving as an artist rather than striving as a woman artist. So she will be the same way than a man trying to be an artist.
Has that always been the case, or is that sort of...
No, I mean, our contemporary art is not really, literature is extremely strong in Algeria, and music is strong. Art is very new. contemporary art, let's say. It's very new, so the woman and the man makes no difference. It's the fact that they make work, and depending on the work you do also. And it's also a country which is, although it's a Muslim country, it's not as strict as a Muslim country. So women have a place. They work. They don't wear the veil. They don't want. If they want, they can. It's not like in Iran perhaps or in Afghanistan